Right.
You're live, Chair.
Right, thank you. Afternoon all. First, could Councillor Webb please turn her camera off? Right, good afternoon everybody and welcome. I myself and County Councillor Ruth Edwards chair the Planning Committee. And as it's the end of this term of the authority, I will take this opportunity now, as I feel very fit to do so, to thank all the members' support over this last few years. You've been exemplary in your attendance as well. And of course, we had the sadness of losing two of our very dedicated members of the Planning Committee, David Dovey and Peter Clark, and they will be sorely missed, and their dedication and knowledge and contribution to the Planning Committee was wonderful. The officers, they've always supported the committee and especially myself very well. And Richard has been my rock through an awful lot of it, and also with Wendy and Nicola. And I hope, Wendy, that you could pass on our good wishes to Nicola, and hoping she's making a good recovery. I don't think there's much more I can say that other than we'll start the meeting in a moment, only to say that Roger Harris has had a bereavement in his close family, but he will try and join the meeting as soon as he's able. He's on the way back from London. So having said all that, I wish you well for the future. Whether some of us will be seeing one another in May, that's yet to be decided. Right, so now I have to read the piece out, as I always do at the beginning of the Planning Committee, and welcome everybody into the Planning Committee, which is held remotely. The meeting has been held in accordance with the emergency legislation that enables the Council to hold this meeting remotely, alongside the Council Constitution, and it ensures that the Council continue to operate and make democratic decisions in an open and transparent way. I would like to remind members that the meeting is still being live streamed to the public, and can I request that you switch off all your cameras and mute your microphones when you are not speaking directly to the committee, to ensure there is no unnecessary background noise, as we've just been alluded to that before the meeting started. All sections of the Members' Code of Conduct will apply to members in this virtual meeting environment and are as applicable now as they are in any traditional meeting setting. Can I also remind members of the meeting to ensure their chat functionality is switched on, and should they wish to speak on a particular item on the agenda, to make the request clear in the area, and I will invite you to speak at the relevant point in the meeting, where you would then unmute your microphone and switch your camera back on. Decisions of this remote committee will hold the same weight as a decision of a normal planning meeting, provided that the meeting remains quorate and meets its legislative requirement to make a decision, regardless of whether a member of this meeting is unable to cast their vote due to technical issues. The decision of the committee will remain valid. Are there any apologies at all, please? I request now from the officers.
Yes, Chair. Apologies from Councillors Woodhouse and Davis.
Thank you very much indeed. So hopefully everybody else is in attendance. And I must stress that we do, I mean, it's a bit late in the day now to say that if you aren't going to, or if you know you're not going to attend a meeting, please phone me or the officers that are relevant to give your apologies for your absence. Thank you very much indeed. I now ask for declarations of interest, please. No declarations of interest? Right, maybe something might arise in the meeting, but as of now, there are no declarations. I could ask now to confirm the accuracy of the minutes of the last meeting.
Move, Chairman.
Seconded.
Right, that's Councillor Higginson and Councillor Anne Webb, proposed and seconded.
Yes.
Right, thank you very much. We now go on to the applications that we are considering now this afternoon. And the first one is at Gwahelog, an application number DM/2019 00800. And I believe, Craig, you're taking this one, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Bill, if you
thank you, Craig. Can't hear you very well, Craig.
Oh, is that any better?
A little. Can everyone else hear Craig?
Bit muffled.
No.
It's quite quiet.
Okay, let me try without the headphones and see if that makes a difference.
I can hear it, and I'm deaf.
He's quiet, Chair.
Yes, it is very muted.
Madam Chair, is that any better?
Oh, better.
Okay. I'll have to work without the headphones and microphone. Phil, you've got the presentation up. That's great. Yes, thank you, members. This is an application which has been before the Planning Committee before and was actually approved by the Planning Committee on the 2nd of February 2021. The consent that was given was for the demolition of an existing bungalow at the site, which is Homestead, which is the dwelling in front of you on the location plan at the moment. This decision made by the Planning Committee was subsequently subject to a judicial review by local residents on the single grounds of challenge to grant of the permission being on the part the officer's report was substantially misleading in relation to foul drainage and didn't accurately reflect the circular with regards to drainage, with particular regard to amenity. Therefore, the judge found in favour of the local residents, and the decision was therefore quashed, and now this application has been fully reappraised and is being resubmitted now for consideration by the local planning authority and being considered today by members. As part of the reappraisal of the application, officers have done a forensic review of the policy framework and with regards to the development proposal, and reviewed all matters with regards to landscape, highways and drainage, again with internal consultees and a consultation with the local community council and neighbouring properties. So the application is now for further review. The recommendation today from officers is a recommendation to refuse the planning consent. This is due to a conflict with regards to policy H3. And this is a change in recommendation from the previous recommendation from officers, which I will go into in some detail in a moment. So committee members are fully aware of where the change in recommendation comes from. But at first, I want to run through what the proposal is, run through the submitted plans with members so you're fully aware of the context. So the site is before you on the plan today. So that is in the red line. It says a bungalow at the moment, the Homestead. It is the last property on the eastern side of the minor village of Gwehelog, and I would say it's the last property within the physical boundary of Gwehelog in terms of that village form. The proposed development is to demolish the existing bungalow and replace with one 4-bedroom dwelling and one 5-bedroom dwelling. So Phil, if you'd like to run through the scheme. This is the existing layout plan, so you can see that the homestead and the associated gardens and access. And if you go to the next plan, Phil. Oh, sorry, it's photographs. So these are the photographs of the site. So the members who were on site yesterday, and I know a lot of members have been here a couple of times now. So hopefully you are familiar with the site and with the village. But on the left, there is the property, the homestead. Phil, just go to the next property. So this is looking at it from the road above the hedge. That is the single-storey bungalow, and you can see the relationship it has there with the neighbouring property, T Cwtch. And these are photographs internally within the site, showing the grounds, the lawn and the landscaping. This is the access point, and again showing the visibility down Wainfield Lane. And this is the site layout. So this is outlining what the proposed development is, which is for 2 dwellings, as I've said, one 4-bedroom dwelling, one 5-bedroom dwelling. And they would have very similar design and form in terms of their appearance. Plot 1 would measure 9 metres to the ridge, and it would include an internal garage. And plot 2 would have a pitch roof that would measure 9 metres to the ridge. And there would also be a detached garage located in the front of plot 2 as well. The proposed materials, Phil, if you'd like to go to the next slide. This plan just, the plan just highlighted the drainage, location of the drainage fields. So you can see there which was the discussion with regards and the part of the judgment that was made with regard to the judicial review, which I'll run through in a moment. If you run through to the next slide, Phil, you can see here the design of the dwellings in terms of their form and their materials that are proposed to be used. So we have textured render, large boarding for the external walls, slate for the roof and coated aluminium or UPVC for the openings, but they're quite traditional chimneys, pitch roofs and traditional elements. So Phil, if you'd like to go on to the next one. So this shows the plot number 2 and a detached garage. So again, very similar in terms of form and design, modern but with traditional features. And this is the view from Wainfield Lane, so the street scene. So you can see the relationship of the 2 plots with T Cwtch and how that street hierarchy would work in this proposed development. Phil, if you'd like to go back to the first slide, I think the location plan, I think it would be good if I can explain the rationale behind the change in the policy. So, as I explained, Planning Committee did determine to approve this application back on the 2nd of February 2021. Since then, since the judicial review and the quashing of the decision, we have done a full reappraisal of the application as planning officers. And if I outline, and as outlined in the report, policy H3 allows residential development in minor villages for minor infill of no more than 1 or 2 dwellings resulting from the filling of a small gap between existing dwellings, or residential redevelopment or conversion to residential or subdivision of large dwellings, subject to detailed planning considerations, including no unacceptable adverse impact on the village form, character and surrounding landscape, and other policies of the LTP that seek to protect existing retail, employment and community uses. This proposed development would result in the loss of one existing bungalow and the creation of 2 dwellings. It isn't the filling of a small gap between existing dwellings. There is no other dwelling adjacent to homestead that allows full compliance, and there is conflict with policy H3 with regard to the fact that it isn't the infilling of a small gap between those existing dwellings. And we have reviewed the planning policy, reviewed other planning decisions to ensure that this is the correct recommendation for the planning committee. There is that conflict with policy H3. Therefore, that's the rationale as to why officers have altered their recommendation in relation to this scheme. There is a bit of ambiguity with regards to one element of the policy H3, which relates to residential redevelopment. However, this isn't defined within a supplementary planning guidance or defined within the LDP. Therefore, by reviewing policy H3, we have to consider whether it does comply. And unfortunately, in this circumstance, there isn't an existing dwelling adjacent to the site, and it isn't strictly infill. Therefore, we feel that the correct recommendation on review of the planning policy and the application is to withhold planning consent and recommend the planning committees refuse a planning application. There are other matters which local residents and the Community Council have raised with regards to reasons to refuse this planning application, and the report details the rationale as to why officers do not feel there are grounds to refuse this planning application based on landscape impact, design of the dwellings or highway considerations. Obviously, the report goes into significant detail with regards to the judgment and the judicial review and the conclusions that the judge found with regards to foul drainage, and we are fully aware that foul drainage is a consideration within this area. The judge did find that it was accurate for the previous committee report to say that building control inspectors considered that the drainage proposals met the requirement of the building regulations, as the drainage fields were required to be at least 10 metres from a building. Furthermore, that the authority's building control officers were not obliged to have regard to approved document H2 and were entitled to assess compliance by reference of the British standard. However, this previous decision was quashed because the report was not accurate in the context of building control. In his opinion, it did not follow the same approach could or should be adopted by the planning committee, and the planning officers we should have outlined within the report that there was direct consideration of the circular on drainage 008/2018, particularly with regards to amenity and the health of occupiers of both the proposed dwellings and local residents as well. This is clearly outlined now within the report. It's a separate section on amenity within the report presented to members today, and it has been concluded that the impact on drainage would not be unacceptable, and officers have concluded, in consultation with professional consultees, that the development in all probabilities would be acceptable. So the professional consultees are satisfied on technical implementation grounds and have advised the potential risk of harm to any neighbouring amenity is not significant. In accordance with the guidance in Planning Circular 008/2018, planning officers are satisfied that there is no overriding reason why the proposed development should be recommended for refusal, given the principle of the proposed foul drainage proposals is considered to be acceptable, and technical advisors such as Natural Resources Wales, building control officers and environmental health have no objection to the proposed development. If the foul drainage cannot achieve building regulation requirements or achieve the required environmental permit, the development would not be able to be carried out. So there are separate legislative procedures for those aspects. So planning officers are recommending today that the application is refused based on one sole ground, which is that the proposed development the construction of 2 dwellings at this site does not constitute infill development, as it is not a small gap between existing dwellings, and therefore the development would be contrary to policy H3 of the Monmouthshire Local Development Plan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Craig. A lot of detail, a lot to take on board. And as you say, most members have been to the site several times. I will now take comments from the committee, please. Oh, sorry, I haven't got my chat working.
Sorry, Madam Chair. We have some public speaking.
Yes, sorry, I just realised that. I'm ever so sorry, Craig. It was rather a lot taken on board just then. I believe Councillor Smith is the first one that that should have the right to comment. Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much, Chairman, for allowing me to speak this afternoon. My apologies, members, for not attending the site meeting yesterday. It coincided with the meeting of the Fire Authority. I've spoken against this application, a planning committee, in 2020 and 2021. And on both occasions, my objections were overruled. Following,
you put your camera on, Councillor Smith.
Do you really want to see me?
Well, I'm just concerned about those that are viewing remote.
Okay, that's fine. Yes. So on both occasions, I opposed the planning application. My objections were obviously overruled. Now, following the High Court decision to quash the Planning Permission, I'm pleased officers have now recommended the Homestead proposal for refusal. I'll be very brief, therefore, and simply wish to emphasise I support the recommended refusal. I have long argued the Homestead has already had its infill plot, now built and called Tikuch. There is no gap left for more infill. So the current proposal cannot comply with the policy that the officer has referred to, policy H3, which says infill must be the filling of a small gap between existing dwellings. If we have policies, we must comply with those policies, or we have no credibility at all. I know the planning history of this top of Wainfield Lane well, where the adjoining field to the north was refused permission for a dwelling, and where Tikuch was approved by officers, even though its ridge was some metres higher than the planning committee members had required. And in the photographs that you saw in the officer's presentation, you could clearly see the height of Tikuch adjacent the bungalow, and what is now proposed in the application would show an even higher ridge than Tikuch. Many members will have seen at yesterday's site inspection how prominent that Hilltop Homestead site is in the landscape, and you will have noted that the 2 large buildings proposed are higher than Tikuch. I've said that. The application on that adjacent field refused those years ago was on the grounds mainly of visibility, of it being seen. These are well and away more conspicuous in the proposals. So when members have seen yesterday's site inspection how prominent the Hilltop Homestead site is in the landscape, you've noticed the 2 large dwellings proposed, that they are going to be higher than Tikuch. They will be incredibly prominent, and you will see them from the main road as you drive along. Something that you have sought as a planning committee to conceal the ridges of the dwellings going down Wainfield Lane. When the harmful landscape impact is added to the well-documented foul drainage problems in Wainfield Lane, it is apparent there are no mitigating factors that support the proposal for 2 large houses. I therefore urge members to endorse the officer recommendation and refuse this application as contrary to the infill policy H3, which is a policy of Monmouthshire County Council, and we should adhere to our policies. So thank you, members, for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, and also you can have the grace, if you wish, to sum up with 2 minutes after we've discussed it. Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. I believe now, Craig, we have got a video to see.
Yes,
By
Madam
the
Chair.
objector. Right,
Yes.
I'll leave you to introduce that then, please, Craig.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just let the technology work. Can everyone, Madam Chair, can you see a black square on your screen?
Yes, I can indeed, Craig. Everybody
Okay.
else happy?
Yeah, so this is a audio recording from a local resident, Louise Young. So I'll just play it now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon. I'm Louise Young, one of many local residents who oppose the homestead proposal, and I thank you, Chair, for this opportunity to speak via recording. I welcome the fact that your officers have recommended refusal for the scheme because it does not comply with the local plan infill policy. I'm pleased with the recommendation because Homestead has already had an infill plot, which is now called Teakutch. Local residents have long argued that trying to squeeze in yet more large houses cannot possibly be said to comply with the infill policy, as it is not filling a small gap between existing dwellings. I very much hope that members will feel able to support the recommendation for refusal, and if that's the case, I'm also aware that the applicants will still be able to go to appeal so that an independent inspector could have the final say. Should the homestead scheme end up going to an appeal, local residents would support the council in fighting the scheme, but would also oppose the 2 dwellings for reasons other than just the infill policy. I was disappointed that your officer's report did not acknowledge and include further reasons, such as landscape harm that would result from the construction of 2 large dwellings, both as tall or taller than Teakutch, and on the crest of a hill, as members will have seen on their recent site visit. In the past, your officers have apologised for the height of Teakutch, which they approved under delegated powers. They assured local residents that the mistake would never be repeated, especially as the Homestead rear garden site is literally on the top of the hill, so is visible from far and wide and will be very damaging to the designated high-value landscape. I was also disappointed that your officer's report does not recognise the drainage and highways problems that would result if the scheme were ever built. The site is too small to accommodate sufficient parking, and there isn't a proper turning space. There is also too little land available to deal with foul drainage, which won't meet building regulations, a huge concern for local residents and the reason for the judicial review. The lack of foul drainage also means there is no room to provide any meaningful landscaping. For all of the aforementioned reasons, I strongly support the recommendation for refusal, even if it's just listed for one reason, infill policy. Thank you again, Chair, for allowing me to speak via recording. I respectfully hope that committee members will endorse the recommendation for refusal. Thank you all.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Craig. And I believe now you have something to read out by the agent. Who's doing that? Phil, are you?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, different voice this time.
That's quite all right. You carry on, Phil.
Can you hear me? Everyone hear me?
Yes, perhaps you better introduce yourself, please,
Yeah.
Phil.
My name's Philip Thomas. I'm Development Services Manager with Monmouthshire County Council. I'm reading out representations made by W. Glyn Buckle, MCIAT ACIOB. Members of the Planning Committee and Planning Officers. The officer's report is a shameful capitulation, and it is obvious the council fear legal action from disgruntled neighbours rather than an appeal by the applicants. Councillors should question why, on 2 previous occasions, the application has been recommended for approval and voted in favour with unanimous decisions on both occasions. H3 policy is complied with, as was approved appeal reference APP E6840A12 2174137 on the site opposite Homestead at Luxfield, which is our Monmouthshire County Council reference DC 2011 00977. Council have also debated and approved a similar site at the North, reference TM 2019 00280, demolition of 1 property and replacement of 2 dwellings. The previous report prepared by officers makes it quite clear that in minor villages, planning permission will be granted for minor infill of no more than 1 or 2 dwellings from the filling in of a small gap between existing dwellings or residential development. Following the judicial review, the judge found no issue with the proposal. Paragraph 32 of the judgment gives officers the opportunity to fill in the gaps identified by the judge and approve the proposal. Councillors are duty bound to question officers why the report is a complete turnaround from a cast iron approval to a refusal. The council have a responsibility to treat this application with due care and diligence, competence, honesty and integrity. My clients have complied fully with all requests for additional information from council officers and have complied fully with council policy. When my clients attended the community council meeting, it was agreed that there were no further objections to the proposal. The objecting neighbour just wanted the drainage to work, and this has been scrutinised by Building Control and NRW on 2 separate occasions and approved. The application has received full approval from council members previously. My clients are a young family with 2 children who are desperately trying to make a life for themselves in Gwehelog, in a similar way to other families in the immediate area who have constructed and live in new infill properties. The application as presented by officers clearly identifies the judge's concerns, and the sole reason for the permission being quashed in relation to drainage has been dealt with. This application has been vetted and scrutinised by neighbours and the Community Council on more than 4 occasions, and it beggars belief that the Community Council will still regurgitate objections from 3 years ago, which have little or no relevance. My clients have been in direct contact with Craig O'Connor and Andrew Jones, who informed them that it was a bulletproof application. I would request that council members overturn the recommendation of officers and again approve this application. It is your democratic duty to question the complete turnaround by your officers. A refusal is unacceptable when you consider the scheme has been fully supported by officers and members during the past 4 years with no concerns raised regarding the H3 policy. Following the judicial review decision, we met with planning officers and the Monmouthshire legal team. It was agreed that the application for 2 houses was acceptable and it was a robust application. We had to deal with the new phosphate drainage issues which had arisen in the intervening period, which we did, and this was approved by NRW. At no point was the H3 policy mentioned during the judicial review process. A threat by neighbours for another judicial review is always going to be the case, but by refusing and passing the responsibility on to the Welsh Assembly by way of an appeal is a complete dereliction of duty, with the decision potentially being made for financial reasons alone. My clients deserved equality and respect, so please determine this application on its merits, as you have done so previously, and approve the application. Thank you. Thank
you very much indeed, Phil. That completes the objector and the applicant and local member, unless Councillor Smith wishes to speak at the end. So I believe the first one with a hand up is Councillor Phil Murphy. I'll take your comments, please, first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I've got a lot of sympathy with the last letter that was read out. This must be dreadful from the applicant's point of view. However, it would be very difficult, in my opinion, to go against the ruling of a judicial review. They do have a point about the infill. I think it's more technical than realistic, but nevertheless, they do have a point. So reluctantly, I would have to agree with the current officer's recommendation that we refuse. But I stress again that I do feel very sorry for the applicants. They've had a really rough deal here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Craig, do you wish to speak?
Yes, please, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify a point with regards to the judgment and the judicial review process. That was solely with regards to foul drainage. It didn't take into consideration the infill policy, and the application wasn't reviewed. The decision wasn't reviewed in relation to that infill policy. So just in terms of, so all members are clear, and just to put a point of clarification, is the judicial review was based solely on the foul drainage. The reason why the officers have made a different recommendation is because we have done a full reappraisal of the scheme with internal consultees and reviewed it as planning officers, forensically reviewing the planning policy and reviewing other planning consents. But I just wanted to make that distinction that the infill policy element of this wasn't considered by the judge when he made his judgment of regards to the foul drainage.
Thank you, Craig. I hope that makes it clearer for members to make their decision. Councillor Giles Howard next, please.
Thanks, Chair. But Craig's kind of preempted my question, really. And I mean, the first part of it, the foul drainage. Yes, my interpretation of the JR was that the decision wasn't that the drainage wasn't unacceptable. It was that it wasn't considered as a material factor in the report, given that the circular is somewhat unusual and it requires us to look at things that would normally left to other legislation like building regs. And again, he's answered the point about the scope of policy H3 not being within the remit of the court to consider. So that's fine. Again, like Phil, I have some sympathy with the agent, and it does seem to be quite a severe about turn, considering we've debated and approved this application twice in the past, and I'm not entirely convinced by the application. It's not a difficult policy to interpret, so to have such a considerable turnaround from that original position is striking. But I mean, ultimately, I agree with the recommendation of the report, and yes, it probably will mean that the decision is going to be made by Welsh Government Inspector in the long run, but at least that's an option that the applicant will have, whereas the objectors and the residents of the lane don't. So yeah, reluctantly, I'll support the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howard. Anybody else? Councillor Roger Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Roger. My thoughts are with you this afternoon. So
thank
very
you.
glad that you managed to get back on your last committee meeting.
Yeah, it was really important for me to do that, even under the circumstances. But just to let you know, Madam Chair, I didn't get here for the beginning of the meeting, and therefore, just to let you know that I won't be voting, not having heard all the arguments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, but at least you're aware of the application, and I'm sure it'll be welcome to have your considerations of it.
Thank you, Chair.
Do you wish to comment?
No, I won't under the circumstances. Thanks, Chair. I looked at the application a few days ago, and I needed to clarify some points which I haven't had the opportunity to do so. So I think it wouldn't be opportune for me to come in at such a very contentious application, not being fully ready. Let's put it that way.
Right. Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Harris. Anybody else wish to comment, please? No. Could I have some clarity, officers, on if this plot was a bit larger, and more square and more, well, it says it's suitable for 2 houses to go on there. The drainage was all okayed. It's a demolition of the one, and the word infill then seems to sort of muddy the waters. If it was just a large curtilage, could they then have put 2 houses on there, sort of not saying that it was an infill because there's already a place there? Do you see what I mean?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please, Madam Chair?
Yeah, if it was a large, well, it is a good sized plot. It said it could take 2 houses, and they're demolishing the 1 bungalow to put 2 on there. So the curtilage is as is. But the word infill seems to muddy the waters. If there was that plot somewhere else and it could accommodate 2 houses, would we be looking at it in the same way?
Yeah, so this is part of the discussion really, which I think will certainly be reviewed as part of the replacement local development plan process, is that policy H3 does allow for residential redevelopment.
Yes.
Although it refers first to the small gap between existing dwellings, it does allow for residential redevelopment. However, that terminology is quite ambiguous in that it's not defined anywhere, and it isn't explained as to what residential redevelopment is in that wider context. So this is, to my mind, the last property on the eastern side of Gwahelog. It's within the physical boundary of the village, and it's efficient use of land in terms of this is already residential land. It's brownfield land effectively because it is all residential at the moment. Therefore, where is the harm in resultant in having 2 properties on this plot rather than 1? And I think that's the level of ambiguity with regards to the policy and how we progress that. But there is quite clear on reflection and reviewing other planning decisions that the policy is referring to the filling of a small gap between existing dwellings. There isn't another dwelling on the other side of the homestead in this particular instance. Therefore, reviewing that policy, there is conflict with policy H3, and that's why there is a change in behalf of officers and their recommendation. And I do fully sympathise with regards to the process and the journey that the applicants have been on with regards to this planning application. Although I don't agree with everything that's been said today, I do fully sympathise with the applicants, and you know, as officers, we have to make a recommendation based on planning policy, and after doing this detailed appraisal of the work, it would be wrong of officers to make any other recommendation that has been recommended today. We're here to, you know, advise members and the planning committee members of the right decision in line with your local development plan, and after reviewing the policy, this is the correct recommendation.
Yeah, I agree with all that, and I have great sympathy with the applicant. I'm just thinking if it was a plot that could accommodate 2 bungalows, which would be a much lower than on the landscape, and it was a replacement for the 1, and the word infill wasn't there at all. I'm just thinking, but you know, that would be a different policy altogether. So anyway, I take all your explanation on board, and Craig, and we will have to support, I'm afraid, that the application as it sits in front of us today. So I believe we have Councillor Brown that wishes to comment, please.
Yes, I mean, obviously there is, you know, sympathy for the applicant in terms of, you know, having had approvals previously. But looking at policy H3, it does mention about the village. I think it says about the village. I'm just looking at it now. It says, including no unacceptable adverse impact on village form and character. I mean, I think if you look at the plans and how the other properties are located, I mean, they are sort of basically single dwellings within a reasonable size plot. And, you know, from that point of view, I would have thought some of the wording within the policy DES1 would also apply, which if I can find what that says, it says things like respect the existing form, scale, siting, massing materials and layout of its settings and any neighbouring quality buildings, maintain reasonable levels of privacy and amenity of occupiers of neighbouring properties where applicable, respect built and natural views and panoramas where they include historical features and/or attractive or distinctive built environment or landscape. So I think there is basically there is a further bit in DES1 which talks about ensure that existing residential areas characterised by high standards of privacy and spaciousness are protected from overdevelopment and insensitive or inappropriate infilling. I mean, with regard to infilling, I mean, the policy H3 seems to mention about the gap between existing dwellings, but I think our infill policy does talk about back garden type of developments, and but I don't think looking at the street scene this would necessarily apply. So I can see that it's the specific way in which H3 is worded that it isn't applicable here, and therefore it would be contrary to H3. So I can see the distinction there. But if you have a look at the you go back and have a look at the sort of the layout of the site, you can see that the surrounding dwellings are, tend to be fairly spacious with their own plot. I don't know whether you can show that again on the screen, can you?
Phil, Madam
Is that
Chair,
possible?
yeah, Phil's just going to pop that up now, Madam Chair.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, so if you look at that, I mean, they're all sort of fairly, they tend to be single dwellings that are fairly spacious. So having two squeezed in together would be out of character and out of form. So I think there's a possibility of arguing that it's contrary to policy H3, but also DES1 as well. Don't know what officers think, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Thank you, Phil, for showing the diagram again. Right, anybody else now wish to comment on this application? Craig, have you anything else to add?
Madam Chair, I just wondered if you wanted to come back on Councillor Brown's comments with regards
right,
to
thank you.
this one. With regards to backland development and supplementary planning guidance, that refers more to developments within settlement areas. So this is a H3 minor village. So we, as the policy outlines, we only allow developments with a small gap infill in between existing dwellings. So that backland development would be appropriate for other settlement areas, but not particularly a H3 development. So yeah, that wouldn't be a consideration. But I think, Councillor Brown, you consider that the developments could also potentially have an adverse impact on the village form based on the characteristics of DES1 general design considerations. Officers are of that view. We have come to the conclusion that there is one sole reason to recommend refusal on this application based on the principle and the filling of a small gap between existing dwellings. But if members, and if you have a seconder, if members were of the opinion that the development was unacceptable on other grounds in addition to that, then that is a decision for members. But officers aren't recommending that. Officers are recommending that it is this one reason for refusal.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Craig. Are you all now aware of it has been recommended for a refusal? And also, I think we've discussed this application and we're all well aware of it. Could I ask the local member is not on the planning committee, so anybody wish to move, please?
I move the recommendation.
Second.
That's Councillor Jordan. You're going to move for refusal. And do you have a seconder, please? It wasn't clear.
Second, Giles.
Oh, right, thank you, Giles Howard. Right, so I'll go now to the vote on that recommendation by officers to refuse the application, please. Councillor Brown.
Sorry, I just wondered if you're going to speak to Councillor Smith first, the local member. I thought
she didn't indicate that she wanted to.
Oh, right, okay, thank you.
That she didn't want to. So we've now got the vote in the screen now. If you'd all like to go to the vote, please.
Good afternoon, Chair. Just to introduce myself, I'm Denzel, Assistant for the Planning Committee. We've now had 11 responses, which I believe all members who would indicate they were able to vote during this matter. 8 are for refusal, 2 are against refusal, and 1 is abstained. So I can confirm that that application is being refused.
Thank you very much, Denzel. So that is gone with the recommendations of the officers for refusal. Thank you. We now go on to application, the second application of the day, and that is in Tinton, and this is DM/2020/01495 at the Royal George Hotel. Thank you. Are you taking this one, Phil?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just getting the presentation to the right slides. Okay. So this application at the Royal George was deferred from committee, held on the 1st of March to allow officers to negotiate with the applicant with a view to identifying the number of parking spaces available and where they will be located on the site, primarily for the hotel. So just to go through the slides, that is an amended slide. It just shows the updated street scene view, showing the revised design of the dwelling. I don't think members had any issue with the actual development of the plot. It was the parking situation that was the key issue as far as members were concerned. And then that shows how the new dwelling would fit on the site. There's plenty of parking to serve the actual house itself, so that's not really an issue. It's the displacement or loss of parking on that land that was of concern to members. Got plans showing the actual accommodation that shows 14 rooms there in the chalets, as I call it, which are in the grounds. And then there, the applicant has identified another 2 rooms in the main building, bedrooms 15 and 16. And then that's a scale drawing showing 34 spaces in total, 2 disabled spaces next to the Wild Hare Hotel, and they are policy compliant spaces, 2.6 metres by 4.8 metres, so they sort of larger than the spaces we used to accept as 2.4 metres. They're 2.6 metres wide, so they're fully compliant with the adopted parking guidelines. So I'll leave the slide there. So as I've said, the proposal for the single dwelling meets current parking standards for its own use and would not prejudice the ability of the adjoining hotel to serve its patrons and staff adequately and in accordance with the current parking standards by identifying 34 spaces for the primary use, which is a hotel and associated functions, and those have been shown on that scale drawing. A local objector's reference to a previous application, M11348, is noted, but that featured a scheme for an additional number of guest bedrooms. That would have been 6 more guest bedrooms, and the building also at the time had a function room and banqueting suite, which are no longer in use. The current hotel floor plan shows those spaces as a breakfast room and lounge for the hotel guests. There are also more staff. Were also more staff employed at the time of the previous application than at present. It's cited as 16 compared to 9 staff on site at one time with the current use, and that also reduces parking demand. Moreover, there is no condition, this is an important issue, requiring the land where the proposed dwelling is to be located. There's no condition requiring that land to be retained for parking for the hotel. So this land could be sold off to a third party without any conflict in planning terms. Based on the current adopted parking standards, and even accepting there may be 17 rather than 16 guest rooms, as there's purported to be a room on the second floor that isn't actually, if you've looked in late correspondence, the agent acknowledges that room isn't used as a guest bedroom at the moment owing to shower issues with the shower. The scheme is policy compliant, even accepting there may be 17 rooms, including that room with the shower, and the application is therefore presented again for approval. It's also worth noting that the hotel is a long established facility and some latitude needs to be provided for older businesses when applying the parking guidelines, which were developed to assess new developments. An additional condition is recommended to secure the marking out of the 34 spaces as set out in the report. A reason for refusal is offered if members are minded to refuse the application, again set out in the report, but officers would recommend approval subject to a Section 106 agreement to secure an affordable housing contribution of £12,180. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Phil. I believe the first one wishing to speak is our County Councillor, Anne Webb, please.
Thank you, and good afternoon, members, and those also watching, and to the officers. It's not often that community councils make the press, but this time Tintern Community Council has made the press. Objections have been raised in a heritage village, it says, over a boutique hotel owner's bid to build a 4-bedroomed home. Tintern Community Council has objected, claiming that the development will see the loss of up to 12 parking spaces beside a 16th century listed property, with peak visitor times in the popular tourism destination already causing traffic issues on the Wye Valley Road and elsewhere. A statement by the Community Council to Monmouthshire Council planners says Tintern already suffers from substantial problems with parking capacity due to the large visitor tourist population regularly exceeding the available car parking provision in the village. On a regular basis, all car parking spaces in the village are full, and as a result, cars are parked on the public highways, verges and residential lanes, understandably causing public safety and traffic issues and local residents' concerns. If the proposed development is allowed, this would result in the loss of approximately 12 car parking spaces at the rear of her hotel premises. The community carries on saying that they cannot support any proposal which would have the consequence of reducing the availability of car parking spaces in the village. All those points must be taken into account, and I'm glad that the Community Council has been so positive in its representation, and I think we should always take Community Council's comments into serious consideration. Well, I'm here today to represent the strong feeling of local residents relating to this application. Members will all be aware that the issue with approving the application relates to parking arrangements for the thriving business, which has a coffee, gift shop, pizza area, a marquee with 10 tables, 4 benches on the lawn. The application site was a previous motel. It's a 60s term, but I think that when that was created, it was actually a motel. So the car parking spaces were actually on this site. They're now called chalets. It has bar facilities and rooms as well. Who should provide the parking spaces for all these users of the hotel, I ask? Who should provide these parking spaces? The Wireworks car park, a public county council park, is often full, not only at weekends, but during the week too, and it's used by walkers and tourists regularly who look for a space, go up the lane and can't find one, have to go away to some other town and not support Tintern. Photographs have been submitted to support the parking problem, and Tintern is the most popular tourist venue in Monmouthshire because of its abbey, river and walks. I still cannot equate the parking spaces with the numbers required for day visitors, residents and staff. The owners wish to live on the site and to manage the hotel, and I can quite understand this, to maintain its high standards. I am concerned about the agent's comments, which I find unacceptable. If I ask for a further condition, if we recommend approval, I would ask for a further condition. I take on board what the planning officer has said, but I feel that this new property should be tied to the hotel and not treated as a separate application, because that's what it's for. It's for the use of the owners of the hotel. Members would have seen residents' concern in the papers. Forge Road is narrow with a small pavement. I would suggest that emergency vehicles would have difficulty many times in passing. The parking question has not been resolved, and no internal site visit allowed, as I requested at the March meeting. So I cannot accept the officer's recommendation and ask for this to be refused. I would just add that the hotel is currently on the market anyway. can I acknowledge the concerns that residents have contacted me, and for them this application is totally unacceptable, and I thank them for their contribution to this planning application. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Webb. Councillor Webb, sorry, excuse me. A very detailed report there of the concerns in the locality. I believe there is nobody else wishing to speak at the moment, so the first members will be Councillor Maureen Powell of the committee.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a question really that I'm going to ask. We're talking about this 12 parking spaces. At the moment, who owns that piece of ground with the 12 parking spaces on? Are they specific to the hotel, or is that part of the ground which this new house is proposed to be built on? It's only going to be one new property with one family, so surely that's not going to need 12 parking spaces. So I can't see that they're going to lose all that. But I just wondered who actually does that park belong to? If the officers could answer me.
Yeah, I mean, it belongs to the applicant, who are the hotel owners.
Yeah.
But I think you almost like need to disregard that. I mean, it's owned by them. It has been used historically for parking for the hotel or for staff, but there's no condition, as I said in the presentation, actually securing that land to be used solely for the parking of the hotel. So it could be hived off, it could be chained off so that no parking goes on there. It could be sold to a third party who's got completely no connection with the hotel, and then it wouldn't be available for use for the hotel purposes. So that's an important point we're trying to get across, really, in terms of its sustained ability to be used for the hotel. There is no sustained long-term secure use for that piece of land to be retained for parking for the hotel. Thank you.
No, it does mean that it would be quite all right for a family living in that house to have a couple of parking places for themselves to park in.
Yeah, I mean, as shown on the layout, that they would be solely used by the owners of whoever builds the property and/or lives in it. They wouldn't be used then by the wider public or customers of the hotel. It would be for the occupiers of the house.
Right. Thank you very much.
That question.
That's answered my question. Thank you very much, Bill.
Right, I'll now take Councillor Roger Harris, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I have absolute clarification from the officers that the car parking plan for the Wild Hare Hotel that we saw, for the hotel itself and for the chalet accommodations, is absolutely sufficient or even more than sufficient for the use of the hotel, without the plot of land at the top of the hill there? In other words, as it stands at the moment, if there was a house at the top of the hill not belonging to the hotel, there will be sufficient parking for the users of the hotel, as opposed to any other visitor that comes to Tintern and wants to park somewhere and might want to slip into the hotel car park and not use the hotel car park's facilities. If you take my rambling meaning, is the hotel compliant?
Yes, I mean, and highways have also considered it compliant with the parking guidelines, and they're the ones who provide us with comments on parking directly. So so 34 spaces would be sufficient to provide 16/17 bedrooms, and also then provide some staff parking, which is 3 spaces in this instance. It's 1 per 3 members of staff, and you don't look at the complete employment potential of the hotel. You look at what's going to be an average use at the hotel at one time, and that's deemed to be 9 members of staff that's been offered by the applicants. There's also then additional parking that can then serve the other functions, such as the coffee shop and the lounge bar eating area, But as I said in the presentation, it's primarily a hotel use. So if you're looking at the use classes order, a hotel use is as a D function. You don't then, it may be open to non-residents, but there needs to be some sort of middle ground in assessing what is reasonable to provide parking. You don't look at absolutely every area and then hive it off as part of it an A3 use, part of it is another A3 element. You actually look at it as an entity, and it's an historic inn. It's not necessarily going to have modern parking standards, even in Tinton, which has got parking issues certainly at peak times and weekends, etc. It's got to be something that you interpret with a degree of flexibility. But 34 spaces is certainly considered reasonable and compliant in this sort of location.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Phil. Is that all right, Councillor Harris?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted absolute clarification there for my decision making later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Louise Brown next, please, for comments.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I was looking at the parking standards, and you know, obviously there is a table in there for all zones, and it does say about hotels, and it does say about public houses and also cafes. But I mean, if you look at the report itself on page 32, somebody's obviously gone through parking standards on hotels and public houses and licensed clubs, and obviously there's quite a distinction in terms of the differences in the number of spaces. I don't know how accurate this calculation is, but it talks about sort of 17 for hotels and I think 55 for public houses and licensed clubs, and obviously, you know, cafe parking 4 spaces. Now, I don't know, but also the objector said that the applicant's representative in his statement to the planning committee stated that the White Hare employs up to 40 people at busy times. Now, I don't know whether those were statements. Obviously, this is from an objector, but I mean, there does seem to be a significant difference there. And obviously, if you've got a hotel that also is open as a cafe and you know, takes non-residents in to the bar, then that will add to the parking pressure in relation to the actual establishment. So I'm not quite clear really how many staff, because I think in the letter from the applicant it said about 16 or 17 bedrooms, and then it said only 9 staff as opposed to 40 and at a time, but then it's calculated that on the basis of you know, 3 per member of staff. But I'm not quite sure whether in some senses you should be applying a hybrid type of standard in terms of the use of this place, because if it was a hotel and if it had a bar and a cafe that was only available for residential use, then I could see sticking to a hotel type of parking standard would be reasonable. It also says in the parking standards for all zones about you know, disabled parking, and I don't know whether it looks like 2 spaces are combined to have 1 parking space. Is that sufficient? And also on the tables, it was stated in the applicant's letter that they were going to leave them outside, which would suggest there is the potential of those tables actually being used where parking spaces should be. So I'm just a bit confused really with regard to whether we should be applying a hybrid parking standard here in view of its usage, because I think one of the people who actually supported the application said highly successful in terms of residents and visitors. So if you're going to get visitors going there as well as people who are staying there, then that does actually put more demand on parking. So I'm not quite clear whether or not it should be categorised as a hotel or as a hybrid, which probably would demand more parking spaces because of the cafe and the public bar, the bar open to the public as opposed to a private residential one. I mean, obviously in hotels you do get occasional people popping in, but also our parking standards apply to all zones. Well, obviously in a village area, then the parking in some senses is more important as well. So I think I'm not quite clear whether the correct parking standards are being applied in this particular case and whether narrowing it down just to a hotel is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Brown. Councillor Paul Jordan next, please.
Thank you, Chair. If I can ask this question. If this site had been sold to a local developer 6 months ago, and it was a local developer who were making the application for consent, would we be discussing the number of car parking spaces at the hotel? Perhaps an officer can answer that question.
Well, it wouldn't be that within their gift then to because the land would be divorced from the hotel entirely, and therefore there would be no argument about retaining the land for hotel parking purposes. So I suppose the easy answer is no, we wouldn't be.
That's exactly what I thought. So yes, I'm just thinking a way around the problem if I were the developer or the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jordan. I apologise to Councillor Howard. He had his name up before Councillor Jordan. Councillor Giles Howard next then, please. Very sorry.
No problem, Chair. Better late than never. Yeah, this part of me worries that we're making a mountain out of a molehill with this application, but I do have concerns, and obviously listen to the ward member and others who followed. But I mean, the first thing I'd really like to get clear in my head, and I've read the late letter from the agent. I mean, is it reasonable for us to disassociate that separate parcel of land from the operations of the hotel, given that it seems to have been established as having been in ancillary use as part of the hotel operations? The second point I have then, and I've got the revised to scale parking plan up on my other screen, and I can see there the 34 spaces, including the disabled, the 4 at the front, and the retention of the seating. I also look at an old Google Street View, which shows those 4 spaces being at the front of the Royal George as it was then, 4 or 5, I can't remember. But there is a little bit of a difference in that now the car park plan shows the seating being retained to the front, and those 4 or 5 spaces, as they were in the past, they previously had space within the curtilage of the hotel for vehicles to manoeuvre and exit the site. That wouldn't be the case. That seating effectively pushes those new spaces closer to the highway. So for people to be able to use those spaces, there's going to be vehicle reversing movements directly onto the A466. And whilst I appreciate that highway officers have compared the SPG with what's before us, have they assessed whether or not the movements from those spaces being that much closer to the road and not having that apron will allow for safe vehicle movements? Because I just worry that in other cases there always seems to be a presumption against creating new or multiple accesses directly onto a busy classified road like this, and yet here we are where the only option for people using those spaces would be to manoeuvre straight onto the highway. Many of those people perhaps would be visitors who won't appreciate the nature of the local road network. So I'd appreciate that clarification, please, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Phil, do you wish to address that first, please?
Yes, Highways had sight of the revised details from the agent, so they've assessed it and they maintain no objection. including the parking at the front there. So that's the immediate response to Councillor Howard's issue raised. I'd also like to just reiterate that planning has no ability to prevent the separation of land unless there's, you know, some sort of condition, shall we say, or but even then land can be sold off. It can't necessarily be used for a particular purpose, so without then applying for permission. But planning isn't there to secure land which you know is used in an ancillary element. There's no system, or no it's not part of the planning system to actually secure that. So what we're saying is the land could be hived off, could be used for a different purpose, subject to planning approval, of course, but we can't insist that that land is maintained for parking, even if there's a general desire to do that. That's the point I'm trying to make, really. And in terms of applying the parking standards, I think if we applied the parking standards slavishly, then you'd have a sea of parking everywhere, because they are modern standards. This is an historic coaching inn. It's got 34 spaces to serve the 16/17 bedrooms, some staff, and the additional function of the bar and the restaurant, which is within the bar area, and the coffee shop. So I think really in the context, that's a reasonable proportion of parking for the type of building this is and the capacity it has. There are other car parks in the area, as highways have identified, that could be used at peak times, and you can't penalise this particular business for being, for being in the position it is, when it is striving to provide 34 decent parking spaces for its own use and capacity. I'd make that point.
Thank you, Phil. Some of that was intriguing, and also intriguing about one interesting statement that Councillor Webb said. I don't know if she thought that it should be a condition when the applicant is saying that they need to build a house there for the running of the hotel. In a lot of those conditions, they would be tied as like an annex and couldn't be sold off separately. So whether that comes under this or not, but I can understand you saying it's a separate plot of land. If it was under different ownership, we'd simply be, just simply looking to see if a house could be built on that plot of land in a built-up area or semi-built-up area. So it does muddy the water again of all these sort of issues with parking, and it's under the same ownership and you've got a business involved. There's just a few things there. Is it an annex to the hotel? Because that's what they're saying. They need it to live there, to run the hotel, that apparently is up for sale. So it's all a bit strange. Any clarity on that, Phil, please?
Yeah, we do need to look at it as an independent parcel of land that is a proposed dwelling in its own right, that is independent of the hotel. So I think it sort of stands and falls in that regard, rather than seeking to tie it to the hotel. That's not what the applicant has applied for. It'd be a separate dwelling.
Yeah, but they were saying they needed it for the running of the hotel.
Well, that may be one of their arguments, but certainly not the way it's been considered by the planning officers. We've looked at it on its merits as a separate dwelling.
Right, thank you, Phil, for that. Councillor Phil Murphy next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I was very concerned last time about some rather attractive tables in the front of the hotel, taken up for the spaces. I know that plan that we saw on the screen says seating across the front of the hotel. But I'm sure I read subsequently that the new proposals over parking did actually remove that seating. So the issue that Councillor Jordan was concerned about wouldn't apply then, because the seating wouldn't be there. I think we've got to come to a decision. On this. I absolutely understand all of the issues raised by the Community Council, reflected by Councillor Webb, but from what I can see, the applicant has justified the parking situation, clarified all the points that we raised last time. So I shall recommend approval.
Thank you.
I'll second that, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I will ask first of all if anybody else wishes to comment, and usually it is the prerogative of the sitting county councillor, who is actually Anne Webb, on the committee, to move one way or the other.
Thank you, Chairman. This has been an interesting debate, and I thank all members for their contributions one way or the other. I feel that the parking situation is still conflicting. I am concerned about it, and if parking was outside the actual entrance to the hotel, I think I for one would have to do probably a 6-point turn, but never mind. I'll leave it for members to make their decision, but I do thank everybody for their contributions to this long debate. Thank you very much.
So you don't wish to move one way or the other then, Councillor Webb?
I would like to move refusal, Madam Chairman, please, and thank you so much.
Right, thank you very much. As it's a courtesy to the local member, I will ask first of all, I know it's been moved for approval, but I will take first of all the proposal by Councillor Webb, and I'd like to vote first of all on that for refusal, please.
Sorry, Chair, I think we still need a seconder. This is Denzel.
Yes, sorry, Denzel. Yes, sorry for that, Denzel. It's been a bit confusing to do it this way round. So do you have a seconder for that, Councillor Webb? Anybody wish to come forward, please? If she hasn't got a seconder, then we'll have to go by Councillor Brown. You are seconding for refusal. Yes, right. Thank you, Councillor Brown. So now we go to the first vote, and this is against recommendation. This is for refusal.
Good afternoon again, Chair. This is
Thank you, Denzel.
We've had 11 responses, 6 are against refusal and 5 are for refusal. Because that's within a very narrow margin of error, could I ask that we move to a member by member vote?
Right, certainly. Every member happy with that?
Chair, could I ask a question at the point we're at? We know how to vote against refusal, which is opposite to what we will get if we go for approval.
Sorry?
Sorry, Chair.
Vote for refusal of the application or one against refusal.
Yeah, but either way, Chair, if we've turned the vote the other way around, it's just the same.
Yes, but the motion that was proposed was for refusal. So if this motion fails, then we'll move to the reverse vote.
Right, okay. Yeah. Carry on. Thank you, Chair.
So do you want to do it again as we've just tried to do before we go to the individual, please, Denzel?
No, I think the procedure we've been doing throughout lockdown would be that if it's been a very narrow margin.
Right, that's fine.
So now we
will go now to individuals. If you'll call the names out, please, Denzel.
Chair, are you happy for me to call the names out?
Yes, certainly. Yes, thank you, Richard, now that you're on board. Thank you.
That's okay. We'll start with Councillor Becker. How are you voting?
Against refusal, please.
Councillor Brown?
For refusal.
Councillor Jordan?
For refusal.
Councillor Eason?
Against refusal.
Councillor Edwards?
For refusal.
Councillor Evans?
Against refusal.
Councillor Feakins? Oh, Councillor Feakins isn't here, sorry. Councillor Harris?
Against refusal.
Councillor Higginson?
Against refusal.
Councillor Howard?
For refusal.
Councillor Murphy?
Against refusal.
Councillor Powell?
Against refusal.
Councillor Webb,
For refusal.
Councillor Woodhouse.
Not present.
Okay,
I will have to abstain because my connection has been poor. I haven't been with it throughout the debate.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise you were on board, Sheila. Sorry about that.
that's the vote, Chair.
Right. Got the result now, please, Denzel?
Yeah.
Yes.
50.
Yeah. So I make it 7 against refusal and 5 for refusal, which is different to the result we have in the chat bar. But I'll, but as we've taken that member by member, I'll take that. So that has failed to pass that motion. So we'll now move. If someone would like to move for approval, then we'll take that vote. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much indeed for that, Denzel. So now it's being proposed by Councillor Phil Murphy for approval of the recommendation. Who was the seconder for you?
I second that, Madam Chair.
Right, Councillor David Evans is seconded. So we'll now go to the vote for approval as recommended. Sorry.
Could I propose to say that we move straight to the member by member vote, assuming that it's going to be very close again in the chat bar?
Yes, you can do, Denzel. Richard, you on board again, please?
Yes, Chair. Councillor Becker, how are you voting?
For approval.
Councillor Brown.
Against approval.
Councillor Davis. Sorry, he's not here. Councillor Jordan.
Is he gone?
Councillor Jordan. I'll move on to Councillor Eason.
No, sorry, I'm back with you now. Sorry.
How are you voting, Councillor Jordan?
For refusal.
No, this is a different one.
Yes, sorry, it's either for approval or against approval.
So you're against approval. So is that what you're voting for, Councillor Jordan?
Yes, I'm voting against the application, so for refusal.
For refusal, okay. Councillor Eason.
For approval.
Councillor Edwards.
Against approval.
Councillor Evans.
For approval.
Councillor Harris.
For approval.
Councillor Higginson.
For approval.
Councillor Howard.
Against approval.
Councillor Murphy.
For approval.
Councillor Webb. Sorry, Councillor Powell.
For approval.
Councillor Webb.
Against approval.
And Councillor Woodhouse, I assume you will abstain.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
That's the vote, Chair.
Thank you. Now can we have the final result, please, Denzel?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So that's 7 in favour of approval, 5 against, so that motion has been approved. Thank you.
Can I just say one thing, Madam Chairman? I did make a proposal about one of the conditions, but I really didn't have any answer with regard to that, but I expect it's too late to consider this now.
Do you mind highlighting what it was, Councillor Webb?
I did ask that the application be tied, the new site home house be tied to the hotel premises, bearing in mind this was the reason for the actual application, to manage the hotel.
I believe I had the explanation when I said that was an unusual condition to think of, as it be, because that was the reason why they wanted to run the hotel. But I believe if I know we've taken the vote now, though Denzel hasn't announced, if Phil can highlight exactly what that would have meant.
Yeah, that's not what's been applied for here.
No, but could you just explain something about that condition, please, Phil?
Yeah, well, It's an application for an independent dwelling and a dwelling in its own right that we would normally, in a conventional way, not be a tied dwelling. It's an infill development. We talked about infill a lot today.
Yes, we have.
Clinton, you wouldn't insist on a dwelling in, that meets policy H3 in all other respects, becoming tied to a particular area of land. So that wouldn't be policy compliant. So we would not have recommended the application to be subject to that condition, if I can put it in that sense.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Now we'll ask Denzel if he could give the final vote on that application, please. Denzel?
Yep, thank you, Chair. So there were 7 votes in favour of approval, 5 votes against approval and 1 abstention, which means that vote has passed.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Denzel, for that. So now that has got approval. Councillor Powell, I believe your camera is still on. If you could switch it off, please. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. So we've got now to the 3rd application of the afternoon, and this is in Lower Hardwick, and this is application 2021/0152, please. Phil, you're
Yes, Chair. I'm just
in front again. Thank you.
Right point in the actual presentation. Bear with me. There we are. Can all the members see that slide of the Hardwick Hill Lane?
Yeah.
I can. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is a proposed change of use from a C3 dwelling, a conventional, if you like, single household dwelling, to a C4 use class for a house in multiple occupation. That's the property there. It's a sort of eco house. It's been built to highly sustainable standards. It's on the just off the A48 there, accessed off Hardwick Hill Lane, as we saw yesterday from the site visit. Just have a look at the slide. That's the dwelling there. Not been finished yet, actually. That's a sort of slide version of it, because the walls are still blockwork. That's a photograph looking in the parking area, and then that's another photograph. It actually looks like a photograph. That the cladding's actually been taken off from what we could see yesterday. It's quite interesting, isn't it? But the parking area for clearly three spaces in that area of gravel there off the paved area next to the wall there, and on the other side is the A48. That's from looking back from the A48 into the property, and that's the location of it there. That's a sort of layout plan, communal kitchen, living area, and separate bedrooms 5 and 6, and then bedrooms, 4 bedrooms on the other floor. These are showing enhancements, biodiversity enhancements. I'll leave it on that slide. So plot 5, it's a modern, recently completed eco dwelling. It occupies a triangular shaped plot between Hardwick Hill Lane and the A48, and the 2-storey dwelling is finished in timber cladding, or will be, with a green roof, and it has already got the green roof. The site is surrounded by a low-level natural stone wall, and there's an existing vehicular access from Hardwick Hill Lane, which we saw off the actual photographs there, an off-road parking provision within the site. And the site is located within the Chepstow Conservation Area. The town development boundary is within an air quality management area. The proposal seeks the conversion of the property into a house in multiple occupation, which will provide 4 bedrooms and a bathroom on the first floor, and a further 2 bedrooms and a communal kitchen diner on the ground floor. There will be no external alterations to the appearance of the dwelling, of the building. The existing vehicular access and parking provision would be utilised, and use class C4 would place a limit of 6 persons maximum being able to live at the property at one time. This is an existing residential property within the, as I said, the settlement boundary, the town development boundary, and the principle of residential use is already clearly established. There's been a change in legislation in Wales so that now a change to a house in multiple paying accommodation or multiple occupation requires planning permission. We have no specific policies as a council relating to HMOs, but policy H9 regarding flat conversions can generally be used as a guiding principle. H9 of the LDP states that the conversion of properties into flats within town development boundaries will be permitted, providing that the development does not adversely affect the particular qualities of the street scene, not adversely affect the qualities of the building, particularly where they make a positive contribution to the character of conservation areas. And by that, we probably mean things like external staircases and other alterations, punching in windows, etc., to make the building more habitable. And where it also provides reasonable levels of amenity and privacy to adjacent properties and ensures that car parking and service arrangements are met in a manner which preserves the character and appearance of the area. And also it does not adverse impact highway safety concerns. So in this case, there are no external physical alterations to the property, and it would have no impact on the street scene or the wider conservation area. The proposal will not adversely affect the particular qualities of the existing building, as there will be no alterations, and there is no requirement for additional infrastructure such as fire escapes or bin stores. There's a large area of car standing at the front of the property, and this is of sufficient size to accommodate the required parking provision. There will be no alterations to the existing vehicular access into the site or the parking provision. The proposal, therefore, is considered to accord with the objectives of policy H9 of the LDP. The principle of the property being used as an HMO is considered to be acceptable in this location. The dwelling will be used to house private tenants, but the nature of any occupiers would not be a material consideration. The dwelling would continue to be used for residential purposes, and this type of use is appropriate within this area. The building that is the subject of this application is surrounded by residential development, and to the northwest of the site on the opposite side of Hardwick Hill Lane are 4 residential properties, and these are 1- and 2-storey dwellings that face onto Hardwick Hill Lane and the application site. These properties have long front gardens set at least 27 metres from the boundary of this building. They're also set at a higher level. The proposed change of use does not involve any additional window or door openings, so there will be no increase in overlooking as a result. The application seeks to change the arrangement from a potential family of 6 occupying the property to 6 separate households, separate individuals. It's considered that there is no direct correlation between family association and an increase in noise from the property. The level of occupation, 6 individuals, is not considered to be an intensification of use that would directly relate to noise disturbance over and above the existing lawful residential use. The same can be said for impact on the newer dwelling to the east, including the dwelling that is also proposed as an HMO on this agenda, known as Little Hervilles Court. There'll be no alterations to the vehicular access to the site. The Highway Authority has raised concerns of the access arrangements. Planning permission was granted for the dwelling on this site in November 2018, and at that time 3 car parking spaces were provided in the forecourt that enabled cars to access and egress the newly constructed access of Hardwick Hill Lane. The current proposal does not propose any alterations to the access or the parking, and 3 car parking spaces are considered reasonable for this proposal, given the sustainable location of this site, without then increasing the hard standing area to create more parking. The applicant has supplied a vehicular tracking plan that shows that vehicles could enter and leave the site in a forward gear. So given the nature of the proposal, there is evidence of lower levels of car ownership, but more importantly, the very sustainable location of this site, close to the town centre, walking distance to amenities and public transport, the level of parking is considered acceptable. The proposal is considered to accord with the objectives of policy MV1 of the LDP, providing adequate on-site parking, and is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Phil. And yes, some of us were there at the application site as of yesterday. I'd like to welcome Councillor Paul Pavier, who wished to speak as a local member, as he's not a member of the Planning Committee. Thank you. You have 4 minutes to speak, Councillor, and 2 minutes if you could indicate at the end if you wish to sum up for 2 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you for affording me the opportunity to speak this afternoon. So item 4C is the first of the change of use applications being put forward by the same applicant for neighbouring dwellings this afternoon. I think there's several issues the committee need to consider in relation to both these applications, as there is direct synergy between the two of them. In terms of this one, 01562, in general policy terms, is the creation of houses of multiple occupancy a model of residential living that we want to aspire to in this county? Now, the national policy direction of travel on HMOs has shifted markedly over the last few years. The Welsh Government's review of HMOs back in 2015 set out some of the trends associated and challenges as well associated with HMOs within Welsh local authorities. Problems commonly associated with HMOs highlighted in that report are generally accepted to include damage to social cohesion with higher levels of transient residents and fewer long-term households and established families, increases in antisocial behaviour, noise and other potentially associated crime, reduction in the quality of the local environment and street scene because of increased litter, refuse and fly tipping, and increased levels of disrepair, a change of character in the area, increased pressure on parking, and a reduction in provision of community facilities for families and children, in particular pressure on schools through falling roles. Now, in 2017, the Welsh Government conceded in its guidance on HMOs that due to the nature of HMOs, residents on low incomes and/or from vulnerable groups who are likely to be unrelated, that they can be more intensive than single-use households. Now, therefore, the Welsh Government have and continue to encourage local authorities to move away from HMOs to more self-contained accommodation. So the original applications for all the properties on this site were for family residential dwellings. Local residents accepted that and endured a significant amount of inconvenience and disruption due to the length of time that these units took to be constructed, some of which are still to be completed with planning conditions outstanding. We need more family accommodation in Chepstow. We need to attract more families into them. And as Cabinet Member Lead for Education, I know this that this part of the county has the lowest birth rate in Monmouthshire, and the impact is that all the schools within the cluster are carrying significant surplus places. This is not sustainable in the long term. Is the application right for this area? Well, a number of you attended the site visit yesterday, and obviously there are some councillors in Chepstow and represent the wards surrounding Chepstow. You will know the access challenges that this site has, both in terms of accessing Hardwick Hill Lane off the A48 and into the site itself. So it's no wonder that MCC Highways have highlighted those concerns in its report, as well as emphasising the parking stress that will be caused on adjacent streets if the application is approved. The application is for 5 bedrooms, but only have 3 parking spaces. I mean, realistically, there will be more than 3 cars being parked in that driveway and significantly increased traffic movement into Hardwick Hill Lane. Moreover, as there is no one-way system along Hardwick Hill Lane, which I've long called for, the challenges of ingress, egress and car manoeuvre are extreme, which just highlights to me that this site is logistically impractical for this application, as it will compromise highway safety. Finally, in terms of this location, it's right in the middle of an air quality management zone, and the access point to Hardwick Hill Lane is directly opposite a diffusion tube which measures the levels of pollution in that part of the zone. That measuring point at CH4 has the highest levels of nitrogen dioxide in the entire zone. There was a marked uplift in levels in 2019, which was using the 2018 data set, which demonstrated the local impact of the removal of the bridge tolls, with more traffic movement and more pollution. So while the data set for 2020 and 2021, when the 2021 data is published, are non-comparable because of the pandemic, without local authority policy decisions, so we consider the current closure of the High Street and the development of the Larkfield trading estate, we have actively increased the pressure and pollution in that zone. We haven't mitigated against it. So the policy apex should be very clear to all of us. I think in 2019, this authority called a climate emergency, which was unanimously passed. That is in effect a critical incident warning, which has to affect business continuity, as well as policy practice and implementation. And planning policy has a significant role and responsibility in assisting the authority to deal with that critical incident warning. For the responsible officers to state in the report that the impact on air quality as a result of this change would be minimal is, in my view, utterly wrong. And I would like to know what consultation was undertaken with Hugh Owen here within the authority and with Welsh Government to oversee the management of the zone on this and the next application. So, Madam Chair, allowing this application for me completely flies in the face of the management air quality zone and the calling of a climate emergency. So I'll leave it there, and I would like to conclude at the end, please.
Right, thank you very much, Councillor Pavier. There's no other public speaking, so I will now go to the first. I haven't got the hand, sorry, in this application. Sorry. Could you please mention if you've got your hand in the chat bar wishing to speak, please? Well, I'm waiting for mine to come up.
Jeremy up.
I've got it now, thank you. Councillor Easton.
Yeah,
I'll take your comments, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My camera should be on, but there we go.
Yes, I can see you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Everything that Councillor Pavier has said, I'd like to have said, because it's a very delicate issue, HMOs. I think they bring a lot of antisocial behaviour to the area, whilst at the same time, as an authority, we should be responsible for finding homes for individuals who need homes, but they've got to be properly managed. And my experience is that this, I got one or two in my ward where they're not managed properly, and it causes a lot of antisocial behaviour. And this position of this one in Chepstow in particular, I think could be prone to having some problems in the area, exactly as to what Paul Pavier has just said. To have, for example, 5 individuals in a semi-detached house, now this is not dissimilar to that, brings with it the problems. Paul Pavier said everything I need to say, except I feel very concerned that the planning authority has not really looked at the effects that HMOs will have on the individuals in the immediate area without being a NIMBY. They got to be managed properly. They got to be controlled properly. And the individuals, if there are too many of them in an HMO, it creates bigger problems. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Easton. Councillor Jeremy Becker next, please. Welcome, Jeremy.
Hello, Chair. You've skipped Giles again.
Oh, I skipped Giles.
I wouldn't want to be responsible for skipping Giles again.
No, I'm very sorry. I don't know what it is, Giles, but I'm ever so sorry again to have missed you. So I will now take you next on the comments, please, Councillor Howard.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Well, I'm probably going to strike a bit of a different note. With some comments about crime, antisocial behaviour. I mean, let's face it, the difference between an HMO and a flat is primarily the sharing of facilities. So you could still have a large flat with a number of unrelated people in it. The only difference being that they've got their own lounge and their own kitchen. So you can't necessarily assume because it's an HMO that there are going to be crime or antisocial issues. The previous speakers have also referred to Welsh Government guidance and the effect of HMOs on communities. That's a little bit misleading in that the Welsh Government guidance is specifically to address concerns where there are massive concentrations of HMOs, primarily around student populations in 2 particular areas, Cardiff and Rhondda and Taff. In Cardiff, I think it's Cateys and Plasnewydd Ward, and in RCT, it's Treforest. And obviously, I know the area well and dealt with HMO applications there myself, so I know the issues. But what we're talking about in terms of the degree of concentrations where it can be considered that the high level may affect community cohesion and transience is something like 20% of properties within a 50-metre radius of a site having to be HMOs, and then that's the trigger point where anything above that might affect the community, not one property in Chepstow where the majority of the surrounding development is either flats or private houses. So I mean, I'd strongly suggest that any attempt to refuse an application on that basis is going to be steamrollered as appeal. And the other thing I want to point out, and HMOs tend to be perhaps somewhat unfairly associated with people who are struggling in life, maybe vulnerable, or I'm trying to find a nice way of putting it that's not going to cause a offence, but HMOs have an important role as well for for professional people as well as people who may be homeless. They can be for key workers whose wages as nurses or teachers can't possibly afford them a dwelling as a single person, or they could be a stepping stone for people relocating, or could be somebody who needs some temporary accommodation due to relationship breakdown or that sort of thing. I mean, in this case, and I know there's a following report which I do object to because of the highways issues that have been highlighted. In this case, I can't see any material planning reasons for not granting consent, so I'm happy to move approval on this one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Councillor Howard. I visited yesterday, and yes, you do get people that fall on hard times. We've got the cost of living crisis at the moment, where maybe houses are going to be repossessed and so on, and somebody could be, as you say, in a breakup or all sorts of reasons, and we can't tar everybody with the same brush. And I think there might even become more demand for this type of accommodation. We're not overrun with this sort of thing in Monmouthshire. Councillor Becker next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would agree with you actually, and with what Giles was saying. I think that there was a lot of assumption going on to begin with there about what constitutes a risk from HMO. And I apologise if you get some noise in the background. There's some building work going on. It is a bit of an odd duck of a building, really. The only thing that worries me is not so much the HMO purpose, but more that traffic movement out onto Hardwick Hill, which is terribly congested. I don't necessarily think it's the traffic movements in the lane, it's getting out onto the road itself, and it increases those points of collision, which I know that we're going to see other proposals come forward along that road as well. And you know, that is our absolute pinch point in Chepstow, which is responsible for pretty much all of the diabolical traffic snarl ups that we get, the really bad ones. Something goes wrong on that Bulwark Corner area. So that would be my concern. If officers have looked at that and they're convinced it's not going to present a problem, then I can't see anything that we could materially object to this proposal on. So yeah, I mean, it's that just a bit of reassurance really from officers that yeah, that sort of increase in the vulnerability of that corner at Hardwick Hill, that's the bit that I'd like to be reassured about. But other than that, I don't see any problem with the application. We can't make assumptions about people are going to live there. That's very wrong of us.
Yeah, and also we can't assume that they're all going to be driving cars. Even if it's one household, they could have several cars. And at the end of the day, only one car at a time can come out from that junction. So whether it's 2 cars waiting to come out or 22. And of course, it's very close to all the amenities. So a lot of them may not need or require a car. Whether they're travelling to work is a different matter. So thank you for your comments indeed, Jeremy Becker. Councillor Louise Brown next, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Not as a councillor in Monmouthshire, but when I was a councillor in another authority, there were conversions of residential properties into HMSH, houses of multiple occupation, and they did actually cause issues with regard to antisocial behaviour. And I think the problem is that because they were run by a private landlord rather than a registered social provider, a housing association, is that they didn't have the management and support functions, and also the mix of residents were all young people mixed among either elderly or family accommodation, and it didn't work very well at all. But that was a situation where the landlord was actually linked in with the local authority and was supposed to be able to get some support there. But this one is just a private HMO, and I do have concerns. I don't think I would have so many concerns if it was going to be a managed property by by a housing association as such. So, you know, I've had practical experience of the problems that can be caused by HMOs as a result of being a ward councillor. I think the other issue is actually the traffic issue, because the traffic on Hardwick Hill is absolutely horrendous, and you've seen the picture of the you know, I know the site well because obviously you know, I drive by it on a regular basis, but I also think that it's contrary. We were told by the officer that it complied with policy H9 because they were looking at flat conversions as a comparable thing, and a H9D says ensures that car parking and service requirements are met in a manner which preserve the character and appearance of the area and do not have an adverse impact on highway safety or cause traffic congestion. Now, the report itself says that you know, you could have in that dwelling, you could have, you know, one family using 6 bedrooms, but I don't think that you would get the same volume of cars that with just one family that you would get if you've got 6 independent people living there. And I do think it's a very it's very close to that junction. It's very difficult to get out. The road itself is very narrow, and so I don't believe that it complies with H9D of that particular policy because of the car parking and in fact I think, I mean, I don't believe that there's anything on houses in multiple occupation requiring more parking standards, but I think they should actually require a higher level of parking standards than a maximum of 3 per bedroom, and that's all you can get. So if you've got a 5-bedroom property, it's still 3. So, but I think houses in multiple occupation, because you have got different users, and also we don't know what the age mix is going to be and how these properties are going to be managed, because I would like much more reassurance on that particular issue. And as I say, I mean, in the local authority I was based in before, they did have some links with landlords on, you know, how to deal with antisocial behaviour and so forth. But just having a private landlord who can, you know, rent separately to different people, it doesn't have the required level of management that is really needed for HMOs. And I'm surprised actually with HMOs there isn't anything more about fire doors, because my understanding was that you had to have you know, specialised internal fire doors when you do have more people in H houses of multiple occupation, you know, because of the fact that these houses that I knew in the other local authority that were converted did have to, a lot of the conversion was spent on dealing with fire doors and things like that. So, you know, I don't think that, you know, I've got 2 concerns, basically the traffic side, H9D, and also the, you know, the management of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I'd like some clarity on this, please, officer. We can't assume that we're going to have cars for everybody that comes to accommodate this accommodation. And also, even if there's not necessarily 6 individuals in there, it could be 2 families or something with a mix of ages, or parents with a couple of children. It doesn't necessarily follow that it's 6 individual people that don't know one another or anything like that. Could I have some clarity on that, please, Phil?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm sort of beating the drum for sustainability here. This is edge of centre, really. It's very walkable into the middle of Chepstow. The Welsh Government emphasis these days is to not rely on parking standards that we would have applied some years ago to these sort of situations. The encouragement is to use our feet, to walk, or to ride a bike, or to use public transport. And this site ticks the boxes really in regard to all of those sort of options. So there's a strong and persuasive case here, a reasonable case, to actually say that 3 parking spaces to serve up to 6 individuals living in this property is entirely reasonable, and that's the argument we've taken. We haven't applied the parking guidelines slavishly. We've applied them in a sensible and what we think is a proportionate manner, given the sustainable location of the site, and we think that's entirely reasonable, and that's why we've argued it would comply with policy H9 rather than slavishly apply parking standards for 1 space per individual. You could of course have, as the chair has suggested, families, 2 families living here, or even 1 family. Some of the occupiers could be children, younger children. They wouldn't have a car, so it's entirely reasonable, I think, in this situation to actually have some flexibility in applying parking and not to get fixated on standards, adopted standards of 1 per individual there, 1 per bedroom. In terms of fire doors, that's a building control matter, so that would be taken up. The change of use would need building regulation approval, and that aspect, the fire authority would be consulted during the building regulation application, and that would be resolved during that. So we wouldn't get involved in internal issues like fire doors as a planning authority. And to go back to Councillor Pavia's point, we have consulted environmental health. They haven't objected to this application or the one also on the agenda, on the other item on the agenda close by. But the point we're trying to make about air quality is that this sort of use in this sustainable location shouldn't create any more impact than what is already the permitted lawful use for that site, which is a single household dwelling house. So we're strongly arguing that particular point. So it should not have any adverse impact on air quality in that particular area because of the nature and scale of the use that is proposed here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for those explanations, Phil. I'll now take comments, please, from Councillor Roger Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this is my last planning committee, and once again I'm sitting here listening to reasons why we really should not be putting people into housing because we haven't got anywhere to park their cars. I'm just sick and tired of it. We need houses. Let's just get people into accommodation and living their lives. And as Ruth says, you know, if there are 3 cars ready to come out of that particular establishment, they're not all coming out together. And whilst we're on the car park, can we go back and look at the plans? Because one of them looked like there were more than 3 parking spaces there. Is that possible to go back and have a look? And while you're doing that, I'm not going to act as thought police and think about who might be going into these places and how delinquent they are and whether or not the landlord is a rackman. I'm here as a planner giving planning advice and hopefully providing accommodation for people to live in. And I'm not looking for the bad bits all the time. Let's worry about the bad bits if there are going to be bad bits, and there are ways of dealing with those. So the bottom line is that I shall be voting for this, and I hope we don't have the same car parking issues raised at the next one. If you look at that, how many bays are there? I can see more than 3.
We looked at that yesterday.
Hmm?
We did look at it yesterday. Do you want to comment, please, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, there are 3 existing parking bays on site. That plan shows more bays could be put in there. I think the argument we've got is there's no need for that because this serving the current size of dwelling, HMO proposed, with 3 spaces would be entirely reasonable. You're going to start then losing the scope that you could have for landscaping, and turning area, I would suggest, if you put in even more spaces. So we would argue against that and say that 3 is reasonable. That's the scale you would request for a single household dwelling, and it's reasonable to equate the level of parking that's proportionate to an HMO to that level. So 3 spaces we think is sufficient in this instance.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not arguing against that, but it's obvious that there can be more cars parked there if more than 3 occupants there want to park their cars there. We can't say that they can't park them there if there's room, surely. Anyway, we want people to be living in there as opposed to, again, as I say, worrying about car parking. So sorry to get on my heels about this, but you know, over the years it's parking rather than housing, etc. And I want to go out on a good note, and let's have some more housing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Maureen Powell next, please.
Oops. Thank you, Chairman. I'm afraid I'm going along a bit the same line as Roger Harris. Why, oh why, do people seem to think that somebody who is on their own and possibly quite young is going to be a vandal, is going to be a troublemaker? Many people, I was many years ago with 2 children without a home. A kindly friend let me have a flat, but I was in that position, and I'm sure I hope you wouldn't think that I was going to go and beat the place up and cause havoc in the city. I'm so cross about it, and young people aren't all. It seems to me, if they're young, they're going to be troublesome. I mean, I've got quite, between us, we've got 7 grandchildren who are in anything from 18 to 30. And any one of those at some time or other, when they've been going to college and things like that, have needed to find accommodation. And there's going to be people like that. And they may just be waiting to find a more permanent resident. But they need a room, they need somewhere to sleep. Please don't tar people with the same brush, and always look on the black side. And the same with the vehicles. It's in walking distance of the town. I dare say there's many people who won't need a car and won't be using a car. So please look at this in a more positive way and a more sympathetic way. You all got your houses, you've all got your beds to go home with. Be thankful and just allow some for other people. Thank you.
Maybe more will want to get rid of their cars because of the cost of fuel these days. Councillor Brown, quickly, please. I've given you a chance to speak already.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it wasn't a question of not looking at people in a positive way. It was from actual experience of HMOs, and I hope that Councillor Powell will respect that. And it was to do with how they were managed that was a concern. But I am concerned about, because when we looked at the HMOs in Caldecott, if you remember, we put on conditions with regard to occupancy, and I am absolutely quite alarmed by the idea that that particular site where it's located could be used by families, and you mentioned children. Now, it would be absolutely lethal for children there in that site if they ran out. There's such a short distance from that busy A48, which never stops with heavy lorries and everything else. If they ran out of that location, they could be killed in an instant. And I think it's irresponsible actually not to consider that, because I think it will be horrendous. So I think the point that I was making about H9D was very relevant in terms of highway safety and traffic congestion. And I don't know if the committee are mindful to approve this application, then I would like some condition on it to say that it's accommodation for adults only, because I am very concerned about a child running out and being killed. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sorry, Councillor Harris, but it could be a family with several children. Councillor Harris.
Yeah, you keep letting Louise in at every possible opportunity, and this is my last time to take crash now. I wish you could get whatever you want to say, Louise, in first of all, and not keep coming back with conditions at the end of it when we're all having our conversations, which you do all the time. Anyway, I won't be suffering that for a lot longer. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. But like I said, it could be just a private residence with several young children in it anyway. So if there are children there, they will have to have taken the parents or whoever their guardians are to take responsibility for their safety, whether it's at just one household or in an HMO. Councillor Webb, please.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say something probably off the record, Chairman, here, just to compliment Councillor Roger Harris. He has always said when we were discussing an application probably 5-6 years ago, when he said that the residents said we don't want those sort of people living around here, and I never forget it, and he raised it and was most concerned about it. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Anne, for that as well.
Yes, thank you very much both. I believe now we've got Councillor Becker. Comments, please, Councillor Becker?
No, Chair. Just, we've wandered away from Roger's forthrightness, which I completely agree with, and into a total load of waffle about kids running out into the road. This is not what we're here to do. I move that we accept the proposal.
Right,
I second that, please. Can I second that?
Right, thank you all. I think it's debated very much. So Councillor Becker has moved approval and it's been seconded by Councillor Webb. So could I please ask?
Sorry, Chair, I think the local member is entitled to.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, but before we go to the vote, could I kindly invite Councillor Pavia to have his 2 minutes again to sum up, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No one was ever suggesting or casting aspersions on people who are living there. The evidence that I drew on were some of the challenges and concerns raised by Welsh Government in their relevant reports and guidance. It's a family dwelling now. It could be sold as a family dwelling if the developer was reasoned enough to sell at the right price. But my understanding of it is, the price he's asking for is considerably more than what is probably or what people are willing to pay within the market rate. But in my view, there are very limited sets of circumstances where HMOs can work in this authority. For example, if it's to deliver supported living arrangements for adults with learning disabilities or extra care for older adults with dementia to keep these residents independent in their own communities, this could potentially work because the lack of car ownership and the creation of what is a community within a community means that a number of these key challenges identified by Welsh Government that I mentioned earlier, not all, but a number of them can be overcome. However, in general terms, this is not the right policy goal for housing in this area, nor in this county, in my view. However, fundamental for me is the application is simply not in the right location because the limited traffic access, with the additional parking stress and air quality management issues that I have raised, which are many of the critical concerns residents have raised as well directly through the consultation process. Now, I understand what assumptions are made about car parking spaces in relation to 3. I mean, let's be absolutely open and honest about 3 cars in this part of Chepstow, which is very much a commuter belt for people working away. The realistic element is that there's going to be more than 3 cars in that space. It's probably likely to be 6, and any associated cars, any visitors, I don't know, where do they park? Where do they park? In Vauxhall Lane and clog up access for people to get in and out of what is a really, really restricted lane? I mean, it just hasn't been thought through, in my view, in relation to this report being put forward. And as I said earlier on, we called a climate emergency. And air quality management should be absolutely pinnacle for what we're trying to achieve here, and we're simply not striking that in moving forward if the planning committee is minded to accept this application. If the committee is minded to accept, if this committee
going on too long.
Sorry.
Can I finish, Chair?
Yes, please, Councillor Pavia, you've got about a minute left.
Yeah.
Not quite.
If the committee is minded to accept this application, which I would find difficult considering the concerns and the policy drivers I raised, then I think there's some element of constraint and condition could be put in. There's no clear sizing on the plan submitted. I would suggest from the plans that provided that at the upper end of the HMO number would mean insufficient room for space for everyday activities.
Would you please wind up? You've had to more than 2 minutes now, Chair.
If the committee limits the number of rooms to 3, it could improve living amenity and limit the impact in the area in relation to traffic and parking. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pavier. It has been moved for approval by Councillor Becker and seconded, I believe, by, I can't remember who it was who seconded.
It was me.
Right, Councillor Webb, thank you. So could I please ask for the vote, please, Richard?
Good afternoon again, Chair. We've had 12 responses, 10 are for approval, 1 against approval and 1 abstention, so that motion is passed.
Right, thank you very much, Denzil. So that application has been approved. Thank you. We now go on to the next application of the afternoon. This is again in Chepstow, and this is also for an HMO, and this is 01623. Thank you very much indeed. Is that you again, Phil, please?
Yes, sorry, it's me again. Right, I shall just get the presentation up. There we are. Can members see the slide there?
Yes, I can see it, Phil.
Yeah. Okay, right. So this is again very close to where we were a few moments ago. It's that right-hand property there. It's a pair of, they're actually detached houses. They look like semis. There's a tiny gap between the two wings at the back there, but they are actually technically detached, although they appear as semis. So it's the right-hand property that's looking from the back, from the main road. That's looking from the front, so it's that left-hand property. You can see a slightly more distinct difference between that and its neighbour to the right. So it's that left-hand property. There's parking in this area to serve the proposed HMO, which again would be for up to 6 individuals. That right-hand garage, the nearest garage element there, would be one of them. There'll be parking down in front of the property for another space, and then 2 spaces to the right where you see some equipment there. So that shows where the parking is. So that's the part of the garage, the triple garage, which will be used. There'll be spacing, 2 spaces there, and then another one in front of the property. So that's 4 spaces in total to serve up to 6, again, individuals in this property. That's a rough plan showing how they could accommodate the bedrooms within it, with a shared kitchen diner on the ground floor. Those are the issues again. So I won't trot through the whole argument. They're very, very similar to the previous applications. Again, there's no external alterations to the property, so I'd emphasise that in terms of impact on the conservation area. There's no fire escapes proposed. So it's again with an easy walking distance of shops, public transport and other facilities. So we feel it's entirely appropriate to expect 3/4 car parking spaces for this property to be reasonable, given the existing lawful use for a single dwelling of a fair size. Furthermore, planning policy Wales and future Wales both promote sustainable development, stating that development should be designed to minimise journey times, promote sustainable modes of transport to reduce the reliance on private motor cars, particularly in these sort of sustainable locations. So there'll be no unacceptable impact upon amenity or upon the special character of the conservation area or historic assets within the vicinity as a result of the development, and we would recommend approval subject to the conditions in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for the report again, Phil, and I believe Councillor Becker obviously wishes to speak on this application. Councillor Becker, please. Again, you have 4 minutes and 2 minutes if you so wish to sum up at the end.
No, I think it's actually Paul to speak.
Sorry,
it's right on the boundary of the 2 wards.
Sorry, it's your livery in Chepstow area. Councillor Pavier, please. I'm very sorry for that. You're mute though, Councillor Pavier.
Sorry, Chair. In terms of this application, I think everything I said in the previous application carries across. While there is a different access point up the other side of Hardwick Hill and onto Steep Street, the ingress, egress and parking challenges are exactly the same. Hence why highways have objected to this application. You know, highway safety is raised as a real issue of concern here. The only other point I would make is, given the last decision, is there is an issue of sandwiching, which I would, which should prevent back-to-back conversions of this nature. And my understanding is to manage HMO development and prevent proliferation, authorities shouldn't have HMOs sandwiched together back-to-back in this potential way. So I think members just need to test that with officers. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Becker, please.
Thank you, Chair, and you're absolutely right, I do want to speak on it. Yes, everything that's gone before can be resaid here, really. Let's not get into some sort of conversation about who's going to be in there. I would ask officers, with an application like this, do we have any way to provision if we think, for instance, that the internal structure of the house doesn't support that many people? In the sense, what I'm thinking of is that bottom floor that's got the kitchen, diner and a bedroom down there. There's no shared living space of sorts which you would expect from a layout like that, with bedrooms on the rooms above. Is that something that we have any say over, or is it purely down to numbers of people and what we can approve?
Yeah, I mean, it'll need building regulation approval for, and the HMO will have to be licensed, so they would look at those matters when it's subject to those elements. Those internal sort of changes are geared up to be looked at by that sort of legislation. We're looking at the actual use rather than any how it will individually be kitted out. Provided there are no external changes, that's the only thing we're particularly bothered about as a planning authority.
Yeah,
that answers your question.
It does. Thank you, Phil. Then for me, Chair, it remains about traffic movements. You know, it remains about, are we going to be introducing more points of weakness to an already stressed part of the system? You know, if highways have said that it is going to cause undue stress, then I don't think I could approve it. But we're in that same place. I think that it is very similar to the last thing. So I'll wait and see what the discussion says, I think. Right.
Thank you, Councillor Becker. Councillor Giles Howard, first time round again now. Thank you, Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm not going to repeat what I said before, but the same principles apply. Sorry about the whimpering in the background. I've got an excitable dog because it's coming up to close to dinner time, so if members can hear him. Yeah, I just wanted to explore with Phil a little bit more about the question raised by Jess about the lack of shared amenity space, because surely we do consider with all types of developments the impacts on the amenity of future occupiers in terms of livable space, any external space, natural lighting to rooms and that sort of thing. And the fact is that with the other application, yes, there was some more space in there, notwithstanding the concerns that some members had. But you know, when the accommodation is primarily a room and a bathroom and is more akin to a hotel, well, to me that's verging a little bit closer to well, basically prison cell. If all you've got is your room and a loo, that's not great quality, is it? If there's nothing else for you within that property, unless you go outside the front door. So I'd like to feel maybe yeah, it's a
bed sit, as we used to refer to years ago.
Yeah, but not even that. I mean, in a bed sit you could probably fit a sofa and a television. But there we are. If Phil could comment a bit more, I'd be grateful. Thanks a lot, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Phil, do you wish to comment?
Yes, I'll be. Yeah, I'm just trying to get the presentation up, Chair, just to have a look. Sorry, so just to understand the point, are members concerned that there's no communal areas, or I'm just trying to understand the point being made, because there's a kitchen diner that would be used by all residents, and then bedrooms, separate bedrooms, which was similar to the other one that we just approved, in a sense that this would be the shared facility, and then everyone would have their own room, and there'd be separate bathrooms as well for certain individuals. So there would also be, let's see if I get the plan up. Bear with me. There's also a garden at the back as well, which presumably be used by all, potential to be used by all residents, which again is similar to the situation that was presented at the other site. So I just didn't quite understand what was meant by there's a lack of communal facilities.
All right, thank you, Phil. Is that okay with you now, Councillor Becker?
I was just going to say I meant more like a shared living space, like a living room, basically. But that's obviously not part of what they're intending to offer. So, yeah, and obviously it sounds like not something that we would be able to mandate anyway. So,
right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else now wishing to comment? No one else wishes to comment? If so, I will call Councillor Becker back if you wish to use your 2 minutes to sum up, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just in relation to the size, and I think members make a pertinent point there. You know, again, if the planning committee is minded to accept this application, then it does have the ability to set conditions and constraints. Now, the definition of a HMO is defined that they are shared houses occupied between 3 and 6 unrelated individuals as their only main residents who share basic amenities such as kitchen or bathroom facilities. Now, local authorities can use their existing discretionary powers to set minimum room standards for determining occupancy of HMO licences. Some already do this and restrict the use of unsized rooms where appropriate. And this approach provides local authorities with the flexibility to apply their discretion when it's considered reasonable. So I would just mind that to members. The UK government has introduced minimum room sizes to the mandatory licensing arrangements in England, and the minimum room sizes in England are a standard below which a room cannot be used as sleeping accommodation. So local authorities in England have to seek higher standards in relation to their HMO sizing. There are no clear sizes on the plans again submitted with this application, so I would suggest from the plans provided that looking at the upper end of the HMO would mean insufficient room space for everyday activities. So if the committee limits the number of rooms within this house, it could improve living amenity and limit the impact on the area in relation to traffic and parking. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for your attendance this afternoon, Councillor Pavier. Anybody else? No more comments then? Does anybody wish to move?
I move, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Higginson, you move, and
Yeah.
what?
I'll second.
So that is for approval, I take it, of the application?
Yes.
Councillor Higginson, sorry, you've pushed for approval, and Councillor Maureen Powell has seconded. So I will go straight now to the vote, please.
Good afternoon again, Chair. We've now had 12 responses, 10 are for approval, one is against approval, and 1 is an abstention. So that motion is quite clearly passed.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Denzel. Now we go on to the last application of the afternoon, and this is 00241. I believe, Andrew, you're taking this one, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good
Thank you,
afternoon, members. And just by way of introduction, for those who are following at home, my name is Andrew Jones. I'm one of the Development Management Area Team Managers. So, yeah, this is a full application that seeks permission for the installation of a surface water drainage scheme at the Crick Road development site. It was one of our candidate sites within the LDP. And just to confirm, the application is presented to you this afternoon, members, as it relates to land owned by the council, and there has been 1 objection received. So just to run through the slides on the screen that you should all be able to follow now. So the site edged in blue there is, say, the allocated Crick Road development site, which has planning approval for 269 dwellings, as well as a care home facility. And the application site relates to the area edged in red then that runs sort of to the west effectively. If we just move on to the next slide. So this shows at a sort of a closer level then the route of the works, which would ultimately terminate going towards the Nedden Brook. And you can see there the route of this drainage solution. The next slide. Thank you, Phil. Actually sort of provides a useful visual annotation there of showing not only the route, but the location of 12 new trees that are to be planted that would compensate for 4 that are to be lost. I'll come on to that later. And then the next slide. This shows some section details taken along the route of the drainage solution, including some of the drainage ditches, as well as the head wall at the outfall that would ultimately connect up with Nedden Brook. And then finally, I know some of the members would have been on site yesterday, so it's quite a long ranging red line boundary. This takes some of the key views along the application site. I think that's just then takes us to a summary of the issues on the next slide. So I think it's important just to sort of set the background here for this scheme, which I say is in relation to the allocated site for 269 dwellings and a care home, and it would serve that scheme. It had originally been intended that the use of ponds and basins would be providing attenuation for surface water on the site. However, upon further detailed investigation, issues such as site topography, levels, and other constraints meant that this could not be provided on site within the original red line of the permission for the new dwellings and the care home. So a solution has been developed that would take the surface water from the site and ultimately into Nedden Brook, which is approximately 300 metres to the west of the allocated and now, as I said earlier, approved site. So the proposed strategy for this site is to convey surface water along the former railway line via gravity drains to the through the Caldicot Castle grounds. The drains would then discharge to an existing storm ditch and system, which would need to be upgraded, and ultimately discharged to a tributary of the Nedden Brook. The route, as I said, follows a steep disused railway embankment located to the southwest of what will be the care home site, leading under the B4 245 carriageway before travelling through woodland and some semi-improved grassland that's associated with the castle. In this case, this part of the solution is that attenuation is provided by ground cellular tanks that would be subject to adoption from Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water. The water would be drained from these along the route before ultimate entry to the Nedden Brook. So in terms of our assessment and evaluation of this solution, in terms of the principle, the officer's report does provide a detailed commentary of the drainage hierarchy. So firstly, the provision of a method that would collect and reuse surface water, and then as well as infiltration to the ground, have been discounted for some of the aforementioned difficulties in terms of constraints, levels and topography. So therefore the proposal to discharge to a water body, and in this case this is the Nedden Brook, utilising an existing drainage ditch, has been developed and agreed by the Internal Drainage District, or the IDD, as well as NRW. So it is considered in principle to be an appropriate solution. In terms of the visual impact, as one might imagine, the route is primarily below ground, and therefore longer term visual impact of the works on the surrounding environment would be limited. As I stated at the outset, unfortunately 4 trees would need to be lost to facilitate the works. However, officers are satisfied that the provision of 12 new trees would mitigate and compensate for this impact. Elements of the development would be above ground are within the Caldicot Castle Country Park, where ditches are to be increased and widened. However, in these cases, landscape and ecological enhancements are proposed, and these would include amenity grassland to publicly accessible landscape areas, as well as shade-tolerant wildflower mix around the top of the drainage channel. So it is acknowledged that the site runs partly to the conservation area and Caldicot Castle Country Park, but officers are satisfied that these soft landscaping proposals, coupled with a condition to secure long-term maintenance and management, would secure adherence to the relevant policies within the LDP. In terms of biodiversity, both the council's ecologist and NRW have been formally consulted and have confirmed no objections to the proposal. I would note that a construction environment management plan or a KEMP has been submitted in support of the application, but it's noted that a condition is not included in the officer's report requiring compliance with this document. Therefore, if members are minded to vote to approve the application, it is recommended that this would be on the basis that an additional condition is attached requiring compliance with the KEMP that would form the 6th condition of the consent. In terms of flooding, the site does lie partly within the C2 flood zone, and accordingly this has been subject to detailed considerations through the drainage strategy as well as flood consequence assessment. This has been reviewed in detail by NRW, who have confirmed that the proposal would not alter the dynamics of the floodplain, and crucially the development would not result in an unacceptable risk of flooding in the local area. In addition, appropriate mitigation and protection has been provided that would ensure the development would not adversely impact upon discharge rates or local water quality. Finally, on the specific topic of surface water, as noticed, the surface water from the development site would be captured and conveyed across the course of this proposal via a series of gravity drains and sewers. At its peak, the flow off-site would be limited to 17 litres per second, and attenuation would be provided to manage and store peak volumes. So this process, as I said, has been discussed and has been subject to critical review by the relevant bodies, who are satisfied that this is an appropriate technical solution that would facilitate the delivery of the 269 dwellings and care home facility. So in conclusion, the application has been subject to detailed consideration in close consultation with the Council's Drainage Officer as well as Natural Resources Wales. Subject to the detailed conditions in the officer's report, in addition to the 6th condition that would require compliance with the KEMP, the proposal is considered to be an appropriate solution to manage the surface water of the development site. And it's on that basis that the application is presented to members with the recommendation for approval.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrew. It was very interesting being on site there yesterday. So it was quite inspiring to think of the engineering and technology that they have today to manage these sort of schemes. I do believe, I'm not sure whose ward this is. I dare say, if
Madam Chairman, it's next to my ward. It's in Councillor Fox's ward. But my ward is on the boundary of it.
Right. Well,
I just basically want to say I would move approval of the proposal.
No other comment at all, Councillor Higginson, that I would
no,
welcome
not
anything.
At all. No. I know the area very well.
Right. Well, we'll go into discussions first before I take up you on your proposal. Anybody else wish to? Councillor Easton, I believe you're. Got your hand up.
Yes, Chair, fully support what Jim has just said. Only one question I will put to Andrew is on these developments we've had in and around Caldecott, resulting with the Netherton Brook being a recipient of a lot of drainage water, what can we put in place to stop individuals piping in foul water into the drainage system, which will then pollute the Netherton? It's a difficult situation, a difficult question, but is there any way we can promote that in the future? Because that is a problem we've had from all the developers in Caldecott that feed into the Netherton. They feed foul water from washing machines and things like that.
I think that's a different aspect altogether, Councillor Easton, to what they're dealing with the care home and homes. This is specific, I believe, Andrew, to that site.
Yeah, those sort of matters would be covered by other bodies and under separate legislation, including the likes of Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water and potentially NRW. So in terms of what's the remit for us as local planning authority, like I said, we're satisfied and NRW and our land drainage officer satisfied that the surface water here, would be appropriate and entering at appropriate rates, and etc. ultimately into the Nedden that wouldn't cause sort of pollution issues. But like I said, a lot of those other matters are covered by and governed by separate bodies and agencies.
Yeah,
so we're looking just at this specific site this afternoon, aren't we? And what we're doing for that.
I appreciate that, Chair, but it'll come to haunt us. I know that. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Eason, for your comment. Anybody else wish to comment now, please? No. Thank you very much indeed. If there's no other comment, and I believe Councillor Higginson has moved for approval of the application, do you have a seconder, please?
I'll second it, Madam Chair.
Yeah, we'll second that, Chair. Yeah.
That's Councillor Evans, is it? Or Councillor?
Yeah, Councillor Evans.
Right, thank you very much. So I can now go straight to the vote, please, members.
We've now had 12 responses, Chair. All of them are for approval. So I have to say that that motion has been passed.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, all done? It's all gone very quiet. I believe that we've more or less come to the end of the meeting then, apart from, I believe, are there any comments on appeals? I see we were informed of one earlier on today. No comment?
There's no appeals to report today, Madam Chair.
No, I think one came by email or something or other, but obviously it's not for us to discuss today if not everybody knows about it. So that, I'm afraid, is the end of the meeting today. So I conclude that, and I wish you all a speedy future. It's been wonderful working with you all. Maybe we'll all meet again in the near future, but I do thank you most sincerely for your comments and your support over this last term of the authority. And I wish you all well, whether you're standing again or not. It's been a pleasure working with you all. So good luck to you all.
Well done, Chair.
And we're all wanting to speak now.
Yeah.
Yes,
I was just
well,
gonna
I'll
say,
take, can I take
Can I go
Giles
first as
then
I'm the
Paul, then
lady?
Maureen?
Can I go first?
yeah, thanks, Chair. I was just going to say this is probably an opportunity. I mean, this could well be my last council meeting. Who knows, as you say? But I think I'd like to thank yourself and Peter Clark for the exceptional way you've chaired the meeting, and of course I recognise Roger in his role as opposition spokesperson and the big commitment he's put in over the past few years, and also to thank the officers, because although we've had massively different opinions over the applications we've dealt with over the last few years, I think everybody's dealt with them with the very best intentions, and it's always been interesting, if not always satisfying. So thanks very much to all members, and who knows, may see you after the election, may not, but good luck for the future.
Thank you, Giles. Roger?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I agree with everything Giles has just said. You know, it's been 18 years, and 18, as far as I'm concerned, very pleasurable years. And I've thoroughly enjoyed the extra burden is not the right word of being on the delegated panel. That has been a real pleasure. You're working with Ruth and Peter all that time, superbly, amicably. I can't think of any times we fell out unless it was what flavour ice cream we were going to have. But it's been a real pleasure, and all I can hope is that the next planning committee, when it gets together, is as good as the one that we've had over the years, because we are looking out for the people of the county. We don't always get it right, but most of the time we do, and long may that continue. So, and basically, I hope to be bumping into some of you on a regular basis. So, and good luck to those of you that are going around again, assuming you get there again. But who knows on that one? So, we're all going to rush off now and see who's got nominated. I think the nominations are now are now closed. But once again, I've thoroughly enjoyed everything, and thank you for support from where it's been needed over the years. So good luck again to all of you. So
thank you very much, Roger, and enjoy your retirement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maureen?
Yes, I would like to say a great thank you to you, Ruth. You've been a wonderful chairman, and I hope that if we both get elected again, you're going to be chairman again, because nobody can do it as well as you do. You've got the knowledge, you've got the experience, and you always seem to keep us under control. And I too would like to thank Roger before he goes, because he's been there with you and with Peter, and you've been a really good team. I should quite miss you, Roger. And
I still live in Abergavenny, Maureen. So
I know you'll still be there to bother me. And I want to thank the officers, because without the officers we wouldn't manage anything, would we? And they've all been so helpful and answered our questions. And I hope as many of us as possible are going to be back next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Maureen. Brilliant. Okay, here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Hope to see you soon. Paul Jordan, I think your face came up on there. Perhaps you've gone now, but
I haven't gone.
Thank you, Paul. You wish to comment?
Well, I think we owe a lot of gratitude to the excellent way in which we've been served by our officers.
Absolutely. Here.
Frankly, it's not just officers within the planning department, within the democratic services and other departments.
Absolutely. Again, there. Yep.
Helpful.
Yeah.
And don't forget, your best asset in any business is your employees.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Jordan, and look forward to seeing you hopefully in the future. If anybody else wish to comment, please switch on your camera and I'll take you now. Otherwise, I've Roger's back on the screen. Anybody else wish to comment? Otherwise,
I'm off now.
Right, thank you.
Wish you all the best in the future, folks who are going to be there or not there. None of us know. So thank you. No, it's a good planning committee. It's been interesting sitting and listening for years. Take care of yourselves, folks. Bye.
Thank you very much, Val.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
And thank you all, and the officers, everyone. I can't thank you enough for the support that I've had over the years. I have thoroughly enjoyed most of it. Sometimes it's a little bit of pressure, but by even the results when it comes to appeals, we seem to be doing very well. So, you know, we're not doing too badly for Monmouthshire anyway. So thank you all very much indeed. Well, God willing, we'll be back seeing one another again if we're successful in May. Anybody else wish to comment? No.
That's it.
That's it. So I will now leave the meeting and wish you all good health for the future. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.